Looking for something to read? Well, these are the books that I've written. Hop on down to the description to find the Amazon links for all 4 of them, and keep your eyes open for more in the future. With that said, on to the video. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am the Omni Viewer, and welcome to Genre Bender's Obscurities and Flawed Gems, where we look at the best stuff you've never heard of. There are few things more intriguing than the subject of lost media, at least in the realm of entertainment. The idea of a work that existed at one point but has since vanished can really get people talking, and in the realm of lost cinema, we can even trace exactly what happened. Most lost movies come from the dawn of the medium, since the concept of film preservation did not exist at the time. Movies were considered disposable after their initial run, so film reels were cast aside and sometimes even recycled for other purposes. More recently, a film based on DC Comics' Batgirl was canned as a result of AT&T buying Time Warner and determining that it did not line up with their vision of the studio's future. Indeed, it was completely deleted from all the servers, which means that unless someone snuck out a flash drive, that thing is gone forever. Then you have unusual cases like Jerry Lewis's The Day the Clown Cried, of which copies exist, but they are sealed up tight because the film was deemed too horrible to ever see the light of day. I recall hearing that the embargo is set to be lifted in a year or two, so that should definitely be interesting. For a long time, Space Monster WANGMAGWI was considered a lost film. After an initial, very brief theatrical run in its native South Korea, it just disappeared. It never aired on TV, never got a revival, was never exported beyond the country's borders, and there was no trace of any copies having been saved. Aside from a few archived TV spots, it seemed that this movie was destined to join the ranks of The Great Buddha Arrival, the original that is, as a kaiju movie that no one would ever get to see. And then SRS Cinema came along. Starting with the release of Deep Sea Monster Reigo vs. Battleship Yamato in 2019, this company has cemented itself as the go-to distributor for obscure kaiju movies in the West, running the full gamut from the artistic to the schlocky and everything in between. They kept getting requests for Space Monster WANGMAGWI if a copy ever surfaced, so they put out some feelers and hit pay dirt. It turns out that a copy of the film had survived and was currently owned by Segi Trading Company, a group that had done nothing with it since the acquisition. SRS reached out, and the offer was soundly rejected. Fortunately, the bigwigs at SRS didn't give up, and eventually a deal was struck to bring this movie to the masses. Now that it's here, we can finally determine if it deserved to be found or if it maybe should have remained sealed away. The plot goes like this. An alien ship from the planet Gamma has arrived to launch an assault on Earth. Their plan involves sending a man-sized monster to the surface, where it will balloon to gigantic proportions because science fiction, and thanks to a control device on its back, they will order it to destroy humanity, thus allowing its masters to arrive unopposed. The plan seems to work out at first. The creature, WANGMAGWI, lands in South Korea and begins marching through Seoul, and there's very little anyone can do besides run like heck. Now, I had no idea what to expect from this movie. Really, I don't think anyone did. Sure, the TV spots informed me that it was probably gonna be campy, but I was still not prepared for just how incredibly odd this movie is. I know the plot description sounds straightforward. Alien invaders release a giant monster to wipe out mankind so they can take over. From Monster Zero to Pacific Rim, it's a formula frequently used because it works. Indeed, Space Monster WANGMAGWI could almost be considered a cookie-cutter example of that plot in motion. I notice you said almost just then. Could it be that something makes a difference to set it apart? Something does indeed, Snazzy, and it's the human element of the story. Most of the time, the human characters in kaiju movies are in one way or another directly involved in the plot. They are the politicians, the scientists, the reporters, the people who would actually be pursuing these things. Every once in a while, though, a giant monster movie comes along that focuses on everyday people who are just trying to survive in the wake of these creatures. Space Monster WANGMAGWI goes that route, but not in the way you would expect. How unexpected are we talking? Well, it seems the filmmakers thought a giant monster rampage would be a perfect source for comedy. It starts out subtly. Ace pilot Jung-Won-Oh is supposed to marry An-hee, and they are so madly in love with each other that it's almost sickening. Oh gets called back to the Air Force base to deal with WANGMAGWI's attack, but An-hee and her mother continue preparing for the wedding. They do this knowing full well that a monster is approaching and everyone else is evacuating, but Anhi seems almost too stubborn to sacrifice her special day, no matter the circumstances. Now yes, the actors play this all straight, but the melodrama is laid on thicker than peanut butter. Ergo, it ultimately comes across as ridiculous how long it takes them to finally call off the wedding. That could have been written off as just a strange creative choice, or even cultural differences in what constitutes good drama, if not for the rest of the movie. WANGMAGWI begins his rampage, and then out of nowhere these two enter the scene and place a bet about which of them is braver, with the stakes being exchanging of money and wives depending on who runs first. They just randomly enter and insert themselves into the movie like they're the South Korean equivalents of Abbott and Costello, and we spend way more time with them than you would think. The routine just keeps going until it reaches the conclusion, and in that time, it goes from amusing to annoying to amusing again. These two come back, incidentally, multiple times, and not once do they contribute anything to the plot. We also get weird moments of random humor throughout, like this dude who seeks out a newspaper to cop a squat on in this crowded building because, there's no bathroom, I guess? And then WANGMAGWI shakes that building, which drops him on the deuce he just dropped. And scene. That's the last we see of him, and I'm left with flashbacks to that horrible Man-Thing movie I reviewed a few years ago. The face he makes when he's pinching his loaf is horrifying. That's definitely going to fuel my nightmares for the next week or two. Then we have this kid. Officially, his name is Squirrel, though you would be forgiven if you didn't know that. The SRS plot synopsis calls him Spider, Wikipedia calls him Street Urchin, and the movie itself never calls him anything, at least not in the subtitles. Well, whatever his name is, we all know what he brings to the plot. A heaping dose of sadism. Squirrel is what you might call the anti-Kenny. Whereas most kids in kaiju movies have a fondness for monsters, Squirrel is WANGMAGWI's greatest nemesis. When it comes to monster fighting, this kid deals more damage with a kitchen knife than the army does with all of its military-grade weapons. He manages to get inside WANGMAGWI's right ear, where he proceeds to slice through the eardrum. He then spends a good chunk of the film wandering around inside the alien's cranium, where he never encounters a brain, but he does finish deafening him by lacerating the other eardrum. Just to add insult to injury, he also whips it out and takes a leak in there. And as if that weren't enough, Squirrel then finds the device the aliens are using to control WANGMAGWI and breaks it. A piece of advanced alien technology years ahead of anything we can produce, and he just rips it apart with his bare hands, thus thwarting the whole invasion. Sheesh, and I thought the kid from Yongari with the itching gun was twisted. This kid is actually dangerous. I hope Korea has its own Batman, because Squirrel definitely became the Joker when he grew up. Yeah, I almost feel bad for WANGMAGWI after a certain point, but if the aliens knew this is how their invasion was stopped, they'd be the laughingstock of the whole galaxy. I tell you, the Earth would have been ours, but the humans had an ingenious device that exploited our only weakness. I mean, it was really loud, you guys. You think that's humiliating? We lost control of our ultimate weapon because an old man had a pipe. That's nothing. We lost to a bunch of hippies. It's the smell that lingers in my mind. What about you? We lost control of our all-powerful monster thanks to an 8-year-old boy who dressed himself in the dark. Then he was hit by a plane. Wow, that's embarrassing, man. You really should have kept that to yourself. Agreed. The error is yours. Now, I would be remiss if I did not give some attention to WANGMAGWI himself. It's his name in the title, after all. WANGMAGWI is a monster clearly affected by a low budget. There's no denying that. The suit does little to disguise the human proportions of the actor within. The claws on both hands and feet look like they were glued on, and the mouth can move a little but never actually closes. In terms of execution, it looks like it came from an Ultraman knockoff. And yet, the design itself isn't that bad. Most of that is owed to the head, which is reminiscent of a grotesquerie. And yes, he means grotesquerie, not gargoyle. There is a difference. A gargoyle is a piece of decorative statuary that also functions as a waterspout, while a grotesquerie is a decorative statue with no practical purpose. Since they have a shared aesthetic and are often found in the same place, they usually get lumped together under the umbrella term of gargoyle, since the term grotesque has other connotations. Just a bit of trivia for any sculptors in the audience. Yes, I do feel confident in comparing WANGMAGWI to a grotesquerie because he doesn't spray liquid. Okay, I stand corrected. Maybe he's a gargoyle after all. Moving on from that diversion, WANGMAGWI's tremendous melon might be his most distinctive feature, but it does wonders for him. Even in silhouette, the head alone would make him recognizable even when compared to other humanoid giants. Meanwhile, the suit may be largely featureless aside from the wrinkly texture, but it does allow the actor to move, and unlike other form-fitting kaiju suits, the proportions do not conflict with each other that badly. To be clear, I don't think this is a great suit, but it's got loads of potential. With a bigger budget, who knows, it might have even been stellar. Even with the limitations of how the suit looks, the cinematography still finds ways to at least try making WANGMAGWI look good. My favorite shot in the whole film is from when WANGMAGWI is entering Seoul. We see him framed in the arch of this structure. At first he looks small, but the closer he gets, the bigger he gets, until he finally just steps over the arch like it's nothing, and we realize just how massive he really is. That is a great way to convey scale in this kind of movie. As I'm sure you've guessed by now, Space Monster WANGMAGWI is one crazy movie, but that's what makes it so fascinating. Even for the era, it would be classified as a bad film, but it's the kind of bad film that winds up being enjoyable simply because of how off the wall it is. It's obvious that the filmmakers wanted to make a good movie, and they did the best they could with what they had. It falls short in some departments, and in others it feels like they were probably drunk during the process, but the way it all comes together has a certain charm to it, the kind of charm you can only find in these older films. There's no postmodern self-awareness about the movie knowing how bad it is. Rather, there is a deep sincerity about how good it wants to be, and that sincerity shines through every single layer of cheese. That all sounds like a long-winded way of calling Space Monster WANGMAGWI a cult classic. I suppose that would be the term, yes. Had Space Monster WANGMAGWI not been sealed away for all of these years, I think it would have been counted as a cult classic by sci-fi fans the world over. It's the best kind of bad movie, not the sort of postmodern type that thinks being self-aware excuses its badness. Watching bad movies that constantly wink at you is like watching a stand-up comedian laugh at his own jokes during his set. That's not funny, it's pathetic. On the other hand, a movie that's trying to be good yet winds up bad anyway can still result in genuine fun. For years, Space Monster WANGMAGWI was lost to the sands of time. Now that it's been found once more, it can finally take its place alongside Reptilicus, Legends of Dinosaurs and Monster Birds, The X from Outer Space, and The Giant Claw. With its head held high or its pants on the ground. Well, whichever way it winds up being, it's a kaiju movie that no fan should miss. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. You know, I see a lot of movie compare this people to King Kong. And I suppose that would be true in a universe where King Kong is about an alien creature that gets tortured by a little boy with a knife. Beyond that, though, I really don't see much of a resemblance. Thank you all for watching. If you want to see us keep doing what we're doing, you might consider doing all the usual YouTube things, as well as hopping down to the description to find links to DeviantArt, Patreon, Twitter, and links for the different books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Your support is naturally appreciated. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.